Dun, 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 dun.
And here it comes for better or more than likely for worse. That's what I've been hearing about this new Lord of the Rings show. Unfortunately, we'll see what time holds, but I have heard quite a bit. Now, to enter the conversation here, just so you know the angle I'm coming from, I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan. I love the films. I love the Hobbit movies as well. Now, maybe I can't say that my entrance is a bit different from other people's in that, I don't always approach franchises maybe in the same way. Some people might have read the books growing up, and that's how they came into the films, watching a very faithful adaptation from my understanding. And one that's certainly been lauded, within the film space, and it deserves that. The Lord of the Rings movies are absolute classics. Peter Jackson did such a good job with them. And even the Hobbits, the Lord of the Rings are definitely better, but the Hobbits are still, I think, enjoyable. The third film had some inconsistencies for me, at least, but number 2 was really good, in my opinion. But anyway, I've read The Hobbit. And that was for school. And I plan to read the books, because again, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm already really late and behind and covering a whole lot, and my schedule gets so packed and I got so much work to do. I'm like, do I really have time to sit down and read? But I really want to. So I might cheat and listen to the audiobooks. But at the same time, I can say, technically I read the book, just in a different format. But anyway, my entrance to the Lord of the Rings universe, again, was a bit different from some people's, in that I actually entered it first through the Lego Lord of the Rings video game. And that's what got me so interested in the universe. And then I watched the movies later on. Maybe, again, it's different, but I was younger as well. I didn't have ready access to the films at that point, but I was able to buy the video game, and I loved the Lego games as a kid. I still do it as an adult. What adult doesn't? They're still so much fun. But the Lord of the Rings, that game is one of my favorites. Hobbit needed that third movie, but other than that, it had the same spirit. But that's how I entered the universe. It was first the Lego Lord of the Rings video game, and then through the films. And I've had some really good experiences, watching the films. I watched The Lord of the Rings by myself. I've seen the extended versions now, too. I have to watch the extended version for Hobbit, or the Hobbit movies. I haven't done that yet. But the extended versions are on HBO Max, and I'm like, well, better. I was sick, actually, at the time. I'm like, I'll just get through about 10 hours. I watched it all, in 2 days. Anyway, and I still got my English paper done the entire time. I'm a good multitasker, apparently. Surprise, surprise. Anyway, I've had some really good experiences with the Lord of the Rings, franchise overall. Like with the Hobbit movies, I watched the 2 in advance of them releasing the third one in theaters, but then I got to watch a free day. A friend of mine invited me to the theater, a bunch of his friends. We went and watched all 3 films. Well, I got there at the tail end of number 1, but we watched 2 and 3 together on the day that it arrived. Maybe it was a little earlier, actually. But it was a real treat. I absolutely enjoyed that. That was a beautiful way to watch the Hobbit films. So I have a reverence for at least the films and the Lord of the Rings universe. The reason I put this out is, before we even look at the title announcement here and before we get to the more conversation on Amazon Prime Video, because I want you to understand the angle I'm coming from, especially since under those terms, I wouldn't be what's considered a Tolkien purist, as I understand it. Because, again, I didn't read the books, and I haven't been as engaged with the franchise for maybe as long as other people have been. I've picked up things along the way, but my entrance was later, and it fell kind of by a different path. And even still, having not read the books yet, it's not a complete journey. But, in spirit, I agree with the heart of the Tolkien Lord of the Rings fan community. Well, that's not really the word I want to use. That's not exactly. No, we'll say the people out there that want to preserve Tolkien's works according to the way that he wrote it, according to the way that he established the Middle-earth universe, and be faithful in that adaptation, that spirit. I certainly resonate with you, and I absolutely agree. Which is why I think everybody's a bit on edge with this one. Now, to be fair, though, as I've also said, I don't think you necessarily call me a Tolkien purist. Again, I in spirit agree with you. But maybe a little more looser on certain things. For example, I love the Middle-earth games. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor and Middle-earth Shadow of War. And as I understand it, those fit into the movie universe. They really did try, but they took certain liberties. But in spirit, I have to say that even while I can understand that maybe for many people they'll be like, well, they didn't exactly stay true to maybe the way we wanted it. I think in spirit, it did reflect the Lord of the Rings universe and that type of feeling and the emotions you got from watching the films, I think it reflected that pretty well in the feeling of the game. And they were still really fun action epic games. Again, gory. I mean, like, how much blood did we need in the game? Like, there were probably a little... I mean, I would look away several times. I mean, I get that orcs are not good creatures, but I don't need to see them die such vicious deaths over and over and over again. But anyway, I understand, as I was saying, those games played a little fast and loose with the lore. But those were entertaining, and I think at the same level they were still trying to, in many ways, be reverent to both the films and the overall story of the Middle-earth universe. And maybe to some extent, you know, I don't know about the Gollum game, but that one stressed. But that's a good segue into this. I just covered that game, again, albeit late. And that's a new video game coming out from Daedalic Entertainment that's going to also... I think it's a prelude to both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, specifically within the film versions, because the imagery is so similar to what Peter Jackson created. But I watched one video in particular, their game overview, in which the developers, or whoever it was narrating, was saying that behind the scenes, there was a goal to illustrate Tolkien's work from the books in, you know, a different form, with some, again, deviations from the films. Again, if it's based on that, I'm not sure how loose, but again, some of the character illustrations were a bit different. But they did express that at some level they wanted to remain authentic to the literature as written, right? And as it was established by J.R.R. Tolkien. So we'll see what happens with that game. But I think it's a very interesting comparison, because while that one seems to be stressing respecting the lore, I've heard a whole lot about Amazon Prime Video's new series, which, as I understand, is a prelude show, like, set way back. Again, I don't know everything. I've been picking up bits and pieces along the way, and I've seen some of the evidence of... I'll get to it. I will say, if you're looking for more information, at least on where the show is going. Okay, simplified, or at least from what I understand. Amazon is trying to take the Lord of the Rings universe and, according to the whims of Jeff Bezos, turn it into Game of Thrones. Which, actually, to bring that up, there's a really good video, in fact, from, some of you might know this school, I'm not exactly sure, but Freedom Project Academy, Freedom Project Academy, yeah, they're an online Christian Judeo-based school out of Wisconsin. They're definitely growing. That's great. I'm actually, I was with them, I think, 10th through 12th grade. And I forget the guy's position, Dr. Duke Pesta. He works I think he teaches English at some university, but he works in some capacity with the school. They have the channel that they run on YouTube, which is absolutely fun to watch. But he did a video a while back on the differences between Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. And as somebody who's not watched Game of Thrones, I don't know much other than the show has the show looks beautiful, at least from the dragon side and the CGI work. It's impressive. I've heard nothing but, again, a lot of reference. Also understand that there's a lot of adult content that I would not watch personally. And that was not exactly in the Lord of the Rings. I mean, again, Lord of the Rings, it's an action epic, and of course there was violence and stuff, but it was tame in the approach. And, J.R.R. Tolkien, as I understand, being I need to read the works and better understand this, but I know he was a religious man. So I hope, I don't believe that spirit is mimicked from, again, that video, which I would absolutely recommend watching with the comparison in Game of Thrones' work. To create... Because, again, even I, as somebody, again, who hasn't done much research, but from that video, understand that there are differences. To compile them might prove distasteful. And I think we've seen at least some of the fallout happening here. Or at least where things are going. There's been a couple mentions, notably through some headlines. And again, I'll provide these resources as well. The way I've been getting apprised on a lot of the stuff going on is through... if you're looking for some recommended channels from me, at least in terms of get a baseline, perhaps you're like me, you're like, well, maybe I'm not as tied to this. I don't know exactly what's going on with this Lord of the Rings thing. I just keep hearing about it. I would recommend Nerdrotics and Just Some Guy. They have covered this pretty extensively. I've been learning bits and pieces from them. I have a lot of videos I got to watch from, specifically from the case of a ladder. But I think Nerdrotics has really boiled this down quite a bit to better understand exactly what's going on. And I will say, I think... the highlight for me has been the headline that this show is hiring an intimacy coordinator. I have no interest in watching a Lord of the Rings show that seems to be, again, very Game of Thrones twisted. Because that played into some of the content with that show, which is why I didn't really watch. But as I also understand, there's a lot of modern rewriting here going on that, again, might end up creating a distasteful Lord of the Rings adaptation. So we'll see in time. I'm going to cover the trailers and stuff. But again, this is all just to give you a bit of a prelude to where I'm coming at it from this angle. And maybe if you're not as familiar with what's actually being talked about here. And plus I need to lay out a baseline for this. Well, actually, I'll get to that. Let's take a look at this title announcement. Again, this is very early days. There's not even a trailer released yet. So we'll see where this goes. Again, I've heard nothing about this for the past... nothing but this is what I had to say for the past couple days. Let's give this a look. I think there are better Amazon shows to watch other than the sounds of this. We'll see in time. So again, this is very much like a time will tell situation. We're going to go ahead and watch this first, and I'll talk about it more by condensed review so I don't watching the video together. One thing I also forgot to mention. This series will be debuting the day of J.R.R. Tolkien's passing. That seems, at least from what I've heard, and the liberties that this show is going to be taking, this sounds really disrespectful. But without further ado, though, let's give this a look. Here we go. Let's at least humor the possibility. Well, it's pretty. I like the music choice. It fits kind of with the feeling of a big fantasy epic, so a bit of an ominous feel.
3 rings for the elven kings under the sky.
And I like the focus on the earlier rings.
In their halls of stone.
That could be interesting.
9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne.
It's an interesting presentation. Ooh, the mist thing looks pretty cool.
Where the shadows lie.
Love the creation of one. Yep, there's a ring. The Rings of Power. Well, let's see. Again, the title sounds interesting. I think too, like the potential CGI that could, indicate of like where the series could go. For example, as I said, Lego Lord of the Rings. And again, my entrance to the Lord of the Rings franchise was different. But I remember those were included, I think it's DLC items, if I remember right. That they had the 3 elven rings. And those had some special powers with them. I forget which, like, maybe, was it fire, air, and water? I might be wrong on that. But anyway, that could be interesting. I think you can see some epic action sequences, at the very least. I mean, with the budget that Amazon, I'm sure, has been putting out for this. I've heard it's, like, pretty high. We'll see what happens. I mean, you have all the potential in the world. But from what I'm hearing, this is not maybe going to fare that well. I mean, and I'm curious to see if this, because we've faced this in the past of many different franchises that experiment. But this is what's interesting by comparison, because as I said, I've come at this universe from a different angle than many, especially with the Tolkien purists, even though, again, in spirit, I agree completely with everything you're saying. I know the magnitude of our franchises have in regard to their fan base, and the potential fallout if bad decisions are made. Star Wars is evidence of this. DC, Marvel, those particular brands, and there's been others as well. We've seen some of the decisions made by the people in charge and running the project that aren't married well to the fan base and the people that, by all accounts, made the brands what they are, and that really, hold the torch as to the reason why those, the creative work on the show that are taking certain liberties have those occupations, is because of the fan response. I don't know the scale, though, in regard to... I think Star Wars is the biggest example. Marvel's starting to get there. DC is somewhere there, too. I think Star Wars is a little higher than others, though, in comparison to the other 3, in regard to how defensive fans like myself are, at preserving the spirit of what George Lucas envisioned, and where Disney sort of has, again, shaken things. Not to go on a tangent with that, but just, again, to make a comparison. Where is Lord of the Rings, though? Is that higher than Star Wars? And the reason I ask that is I've heard all the conversation. I've already seen some of the fallout. I mean, if you can look, well, I mean, Twitter is not always the best judge of anything. I mean, that platform is just a pile of garbage. But I will say, when it came to the Wandering.net versus just some guy, that was an epic fallout. And it, you know, I don't know. Let's see where time goes. But I'm still thinking, where does the Lord of the Rings reverence fit in comparison to other franchise brands? I mean, these are classic works of literature, and again, from what I'm seeing with this new Amazon show, the rumors are not of what's being said. And again, we haven't seen a trailer yet. I understand some people have, not me, but it sounds like in spirit it is not reflecting J.R.R. Tolkien in the way that he established his world, essentially, of Middle-earth. And it's not respecting the lore as it's written. Where does this fall in regard to fan response? Because if this flops, and with the budget that, I mean, this might be a wasted effort in regard to Amazon's, you know, the money they've spent on this, if it's just going to crash and burn with the fans. We've already seen the fallout of other brands like Star Wars, and we're seeing emerging ones like Marvel and DC. Well, they've been kind of making steps toward this direction, but Marvel lately. How big will the explosion be if Lord of the Rings is not generally accepted by the fans? And if the fans and the Tolkien purists, and maybe just fans of the films that want the spirit of Tolkien's world to be embodied without much deviation, right? Without much creative liberty or reimagining, you know, the work. Or maybe trying to modernize Lord of the Rings. Oh, that would be a bad decision. And that's hinted too. And again, I have a lot to learn. I'm going to be doing more research in the time between when we get a trailer for this, hopefully, so I can better understand, have more of a foundation. But you might be witnessing a fallout like no other. I mean, in the pop culture space. Star Wars has been pretty big, and it's lasted for a couple years. But that's been progressive, too, over time. What will Lord of the Rings look like? I'm genuinely curious. And for those of you who might, I don't know, have an inkling, what would you say down below? I mean, that was an interesting title tease. And you think watching it like, oh, it's obviously highly expensive and it seems to reflect at least the look of Lord of the Rings. But if you don't fill that in substance and you don't marry it to Tolkien in spirit or in ambition, people are going to notice. And even people like me who are coming at it again from a different angle, maybe I'm not the best judge or critic in that regard. Maybe, not necessarily not the best, but maybe not the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe there's better voices to listen to, right? Maybe there's voices that are more learned than I am. I fully admit that. But I at least can speak to the fallout of franchises gone wrong. Because we've seen this in the past of other stories. But I don't know what to expect for Tolkien. But from what I'm hearing, this might be, you know, the pop culture war of the ages, essentially. So, I guess fasten your seatbelts now for we get this trailer. I don't know. I mean, maybe we're going to have people being like, you know, at the end of all this, just stick to the movies. Right? Amazon's going to be like, well, we regret this, or we might have an Amazon series that'll blow everybody away. But from what I'm hearing, I don't think people are keeping up their hopes. What are your guys' thoughts, though, with this new Amazon show. What is your opinion? And maybe there's stuff that maybe you're better educated on on some of the rumblings than I am. Again, like I said, I'm going to do a little more research going in, but that's just kind of my general impression for what I know right now. If you want to and you feel so inclined, feel free to chime in maybe some information I don't know about. Maybe I didn't give the best. Maybe there's other things I missed with the whole Amazon, show, but I didn't mention. But as I said, I provided a couple resources at least who I'm listening to get better information. And voices I would say are much more knowledgeable than mine. But I can at least get a window into some things. Notably, what this will possibly look like if it flops. Feel free to let me know what your thoughts are down below. Don't forget all the good stuff, like, subscribing, to sharing that bell. Until next time, until we get more, I'll cover the trailer for it. I'll see. I'm just not putting my hopes up. I will see you guys at whatever point that happens to be. But for now, thanks for watching this video. I love you guys. Don't forget to love yourselves, your fellow man. God bless, and peace.